are here with Ajamu Baraka, human rights activist. Ajamu, you were just recently in Venezuela for the fourth Encuentro of Afro Descendants. Tell us a little bit about these Encuentro, this process, and what its importance is.
Well, I think the main importance of it is to establish political and institutional links among all African people in the world, but with a particular focus on the Americas. And that's especially important today with the very important historic changes taking place in the Americas. Many of us have recognized that in order for us to really advance progressive movement here in this country, that not only do we have to link up with our brothers and sisters on the continent, but we need to have firmer ties with our brothers and sisters in the Americas. So we've always advocated for what we call developing an American-wide consciousness, not only among African people, but among progressive people. So these gatherings have been gatherings that have helped to bring us together to talk about the kinds of linkages that we need to establish, but also to talk about some of the political and theoretical challenges that we face as African people trying to make revolutionary change in the Americas. Mm-hmm. And when you look at what's happening in the Americas, you look at the kind of social change taking place, we find some common characteristics and some common issues. And those issues and characteristics are some of the things we talk about at these gatherings.
Mm-hmm. This one tried to, it seemed from what I could gather, it tried to have some focus on some specific issues, particularly the situation of Afro-Colombians and Haitians. Yeah. And for those in our audience who don't know why those two issues or those two countries and situations should be kind of given a central focus, just if you can, just elaborate on what's happening, particularly in Colombia and Haiti.
Well, I think that in terms of African people, and I think some of the most egregious violations of human rights and self-determination are occurring in Haiti and in Colombia. Of course, many of us know about what happened in Haiti with the earthquake, and the fact that the Haitian republic has been reduced to a stage of perpetual poverty. The notion of real self-determination for Haiti basically is a joke. What has happened is that a number of countries led by the U.S. and France and Canada have seized upon the disaster in Haiti in order to completely reassert their control over that island, the people and the resources. Using the UN, they have basically disallowed any real development to take place in Haiti. And that's a central element for us as African people because of the role that Haiti has played in the ongoing and historic struggles of African people for self-determination and independence. Being the oldest republic, oldest black republic in the world, is essential for us to understand that, as we say, we talk about none of us can be free until Africa's free. We're not going to be really free until Haiti is free also. In Colombia. In Colombia, we have the third largest population of African people outside of Africa. You got Brazil, number one. You got the U.S. and you got Colombia. And people don't always know that. In Colombia, our people are fighting for their lives. Our people have been displaced from their lands, from their territories, by the wars that are taking place, being caught in the middle between FARC, the so-called guerrilla force, and the government, having their lands also targeted by major corporations who align themselves with paramilitary forces in order to displace Africans who are now sitting on top of valuable land. So our people have been displaced by the millions in Colombia. And what is significant about that for Africans in North America or in the U.S. is that displacement and the kinds of terroristic activities directed toward African people could not have been completely successful without the active, direct, and indirect support from the U.S. government through its Plan Colombia, its ability to funnel millions of dollars to the Colombian government to prop up its military, to allow it to engage in this war with FARC, to funnel money indirectly to the paramilitaries, to look the other direction when we see that corporations and the paramilitaries are working together to extract and expel black people from their land, to engage in what they call the democratic security process, where basically they have put military forces in all parts of Colombia. The result being not more democracy or security, but insecurity for African people and indigenous people. So basically, and the fumigations, where they have sprayed people's crops theoretically to eliminate coca, but at the same time they've been eliminating the crops that people have been dependent on in order to live, black people and indigenous folks. Okay, so there is a real direct connection between U.S. support for that repressive government and the plight of African people in Colombia. We need people to understand that and to know that, especially now with this free trade agreement that's on the table that the Obama administration is pushing. That's going to have the result of creating conditions very similar to what we saw in Mexico. That when you had NAFTA and you had the destruction of the countryside and small farmers, the same thing is going to happen in Colombia because many of the African people who are engaged in productive activity are small farmers. But they won't have the outlet that we have with Mexico in terms of being able to go across their borders. They're just going to have to be in the cities and and suffering. So African people need to know about this. Those two issues were raised at the gathering as strategic priorities for African people in the Americas.
Speaking of strategic priorities, I know that ALBA, the Alliance of Bolivarian Republics, being kind of initiated and spearheaded by the Venezuelan government, recently made some agreements that there was going to be kind of a focused priority on Afro descendants in their countries and throughout the region.
Yeah.
And I think that was significant. If you can just kind of speak to what are they trying to get at strategically, and why is that important to an institution like ALBA, which has both a state component and a civil society component?
I think they have recognized that they want to avoid some of the mistakes that were made in the past with progressive movements in the Americas. Understanding that you cannot have effective social transformation, social change, unless you put front and center the issue of white supremacy and the privilege that comes along with that. They recognize that in many societies in the Americas, the issue of race has been sidelined. They understand that as a result of that, if you don't address these issues yourself up front, that basically your enemies will exploit that. Okay, and I think they recognize this as a matter of principle. That basically, because of the integral role that African people played in the creation of the so-called New World here in the Americas, that it is only historically correct and politically principled to begin to deal with these issues in a forthright way. So they want to force other countries to take this seriously. They want to remind countries that we have a framework through the Durban process to address these issues, and they want to make sure that the issue of race and racial contradictions become part of the dialogue when we talk about how we bring about revolutionary change in the Americas.
And our final question, just kind of dealing with this aspect of co-optation. There's a conference being billed. They think it's the World Gathering of People of African Descent in Honduras in August, and some of the leadership have aggressively pursued and received money from right-wing forces, including World Bank, USAID, the Republican Institute, etc., to fund this conference, which is supposed to be kind of a Pan-African gathering as is being billed. But we know there's a heavy element of co-optation in that Obama is supporting it, but he's at the same time negating the Durban process, of which this whole piece is supposed to be linked. So if you can just speak to what's happening there with that process and this whole kind of co-optation, and how we need to be moving forward. The progressive forces in the African world need to be moving forward regardless.
Well, the gathering in Venezuela was in part a reaction, if you will, to that gathering in Honduras. That it was recognized that we could not allow that gathering to be the national and international expression of the interests and the concerns of African descendants. Look, the folks who pulled that piece together are not necessarily bad people. They appear not to have a very well developed historic grasp of what our contemporary challenges are. They believe that they can join forces with the same institutions that are responsible for the repression and the underdevelopment of our people and the peoples of the world. They don't recognize that in this fight against global capitalist domination, that you cannot, lay in bed with the same individuals, same institutions that are part and parcel of this fight against you and your interests. So there's on one level sort of an apolitical quality to it, but on another level, there's a political quality to it in terms of them aligning themselves with this very same forces that we struggle against. So they're going to gather. They have their gatherings, but we don't expect much to come out of that. We don't expect that they're going to raise some of the tough political questions with the West that need to be raised. We don't expect that they're going to make a very assertive push for adhering to the Durban process, the Durban Declaration and Program of Action. We see it basically as a show, a show. But we have to watch it. We have to be careful because our enemies use these kinds of forces, of course, against us.
All right, well, I want to thank you. We'll stop there. Thank you again, Ajamu, for taking some time to be out here with us. And this is Kali signing off for the Black Agenda Report.
Thank you.